Brad Pitt, also a very big fan.
That was the best night of my life.
Hi, Brad. You know how cute I always thought you were.
From winning over Angelina Jolie early in his career to getting caught off guard by celebrities flirting with him right to his face. And this is why nobody has charm like Brad Pitt.
Almost 30 years ago, Brad Pitt stood on a stage and called a woman the love of his life in front of the entire world. He was young, famous, and completely in love. But the woman he named would be gone within months, and the ones who came after would break his heart deeply.
I know which one you're talking about. I'm embarrassed.
I have it here. I have it here. Ta-da! The crush continues.
Yes, the crush continues. We shouldn't show that. I'm embarrassed. Okay, that's my little...
Right.
After 2 marriages, failed romances, and a divorce that dragged on for almost a decade, who really won his heart? And why did it take him so long to admit it? Join us as we unveil the love story Brad Pitt kept hidden for years. The Golden Globe speech nobody forgot. By the mid-1990s, Brad had already lived through a few great loves and a few hard goodbyes. A scene-stealing role in Thelma and Louise had turned him into an overnight heartthrob, and a string of romances followed. He had dated the actress Juliette Lewis during his hungry early years in Los Angeles, back when the two of them were broke, anonymous, and sharing a small bungalow, and some who knew them have called her one of his earliest real loves. But fame changes a man fast, and the quiet days did not last for long. Back in 1996, Brad Pitt was the hottest name in Hollywood, and he was completely smitten. He had met Gwyneth Paltrow 2 years earlier on the set of the dark thriller Saga, where she played his doomed wife, and the chemistry that crackled on screen had spilled straight into real life. They moved fast, and they moved loud. They got engaged, they showed up to events with matching blonde haircuts, and the tabloids could not stop talking about them. They were young, golden, and seemingly built for forever. Then came the moment that fans would replay for decades. When Brad won a Golden Globe for his work in 12 Monkeys, he stepped up to the microphone and saved his final thank you for one person. He literally looked out at a room full of people and called Gwyneth the love of his life and his angel on live television. It was exactly the kind of massive public stunt that most people only ever dream about getting. And the entire planet heard him say it. For a little while, these two actually looked completely unstoppable. They were just 2 beautiful young actors at the absolute peak of their careers, planning out a future together while millions of fans obsessed over the romance. Gwyneth was basically Hollywood royalty in the making, and Brad was the ultimate golden boy who seemed to have every single advantage a person could get. Everyone just assumed a massive wedding was right around the corner, and people really thought this specific relationship would be the one that defined his entire life. But love that lives in the spotlight rarely follows the script that fans write for it. The cameras kept flashing, the magazines kept printing, and the pressure kept building behind the scenes. What the public saw and what the couple actually lived were starting to drift apart. What looked like a perfect fairy tale was about to fall apart in a way that nobody saw coming. The breakup that changed his heart. By June of 1997, the fairy tale was over. Brad and Gwyneth quietly called off their engagement and went their separate ways, and the breakup stunned almost everyone who had watched them shine together. There was no screaming public scandal and no front-page tale of betrayal. The relationship simply ended, the slow and painful way that so many real ones do, leaving fans to wonder what had really gone wrong behind closed doors. For years afterward, Gwyneth carried the weight of it on her own shoulders. She has openly blamed herself for the way things fell apart, admitting that she was young and that she handled it badly. She has called Brad one of the genuinely good people she ever dated. and she never once tried to pin the split on him. That kind of honesty, delivered years later, told fans just how real the love between them had been. People close to the situation suggested the breakup left a deep mark on Brad, too. He had named her his great love in front of the entire planet, and then he watched that love slip through his fingers before he had even turned 35. Friends reportedly gossiped that he grew more guarded after Gwyneth, slower to trust, and far more careful about who he let close to his heart. Whatever had happened, the relationship was over, and Brad was single again. He was still young, famous, and trying to figure out his next step. He threw himself into bigger movie roles to advance his Hollywood career, but anyone close to him knew he was over romance for a while. Meanwhile, the rest of the world stood by, waiting to see which celebrity he would jump to next. It's incredibly moving to see a wealthy actor heal his emotional wounds by collecting massive paychecks for blockbusters, while regular people obsess over his dating life like it's fantasy football. And the very next woman to walk into his life would soon become one of the most famous wives on Earth. America's golden couple. Back in the late 90s, a mutual friend set Brad up on a blind date with Jennifer Aniston. She was the star of Friends, which was the biggest show on Earth at the time, and he was the most famous actor alive. When they actually started dating, people acted as if the universe itself had perfectly planned the whole thing. They seemed funny and easygoing together, and the chemistry was pretty obvious to everyone around them. It is always touching when two impossibly beautiful, wealthy celebrities manage to find love, especially when it gives the public something new to obsess over for a few years. They married in the summer of 2000 in a lavish ceremony that cost a small fortune, and from that moment on, they were America's golden couple. Magazines put them on every cover they could. Fans treated the pair like living proof that real love could survive the madness of Hollywood. Wherever they went, the cameras followed, and the public simply could not get enough of the beautiful, laughing couple who seemed to have it all figured out. Brad actually looked back on that entire relationship with a lot of real affection. Even after the whole thing blew up, he still talked about how great their time together was, and he insisted that the two of them managed to stay on good terms. Those are definitely not the words of a guy who didn't care about his marriage. For nearly 5 years, Jennifer was his wife, his partner, and the person everyone on Earth expected to see next to him. For 5 years straight, this couple completely ran the pop culture world. Their faces sold millions of trashy magazines, their dates were constant headline news, and their marriage became this totally unrealistic benchmark that regular couples actually tried to measure themselves against. Brad later complained that the media has been picking his personal life apart for 3 decades, and this specific relationship was the disaster that started it all. Nothing about his relationship with Jennifer was private, and the constant attention ruined things behind closed doors while everyone on the outside cheered them on. It is always inspiring when millions of ordinary people look at a highly stressful, closely watched celebrity marriage and say, "Yeah, that is exactly what I want for my own life." Fame has a habit of hiding problems until everything completely falls apart. Behind the red carpets and the fake matching smiles, the marriage was already rotting from the inside out. The pressure was building entirely away from the cameras, and absolutely nothing could stop the inevitable crash. And the breaking point would arrive on a movie set, in the form of another woman entirely. When it all fell apart. In 2004, Brad signed on to a flashy action comedy called Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and his co-star was Angelina Jolie. The two of them played a married couple of secret assassins, and the heat between them on screen was impossible to miss. Off-screen, the rumors started almost immediately. and they never really stopped. Suddenly, the golden couple that fans had cheered for did not look quite so untouchable anymore. Jennifer would later describe how her husband seemed to pull away from her during that stretch of time. In her own account, he grew distant and absent, and she remembered a painful sense that when she needed him most, he simply was not there for her. By January of 2005, the marriage was over. The divorce instantly became one of the most talked about splits in entertainment history, and most of the watching public landed firmly on Jennifer's side. For years, fans allegedly believed that Brad had left Jennifer to be with Angelina, and that the affair had quietly begun while the cameras were still rolling on set. Brad never confirmed any of it. In a later interview, he spoke about feeling trapped and unhappy in those years, describing a version of himself sitting on a couch and hiding out, though he quickly insisted that those comments had been twisted out of their real context. The damage to his image, however, was already done. Whatever actually went down behind those closed doors, the result was the same. America's favorite couple was completely done. The headlines were vicious, and Brad walked right out of one marriage straight into the most intense relationship he had ever experienced. There was absolutely no time for a quiet recovery or a soft landing, because nothing helps someone heal from a devastating, highly publicized divorce quite like immediately jumping into another massive relationship. Jennifer rarely talked about the details of the breakup, but the reality was pretty brutal. Her husband completely checked out on her right when her hit show Friends was ending, leaving her totally stranded during one of the worst moments of her life. She later admitted those years left her completely exposed. When Brad and Angelina eventually had their own massive blowout split years later, an insider claimed Jennifer had just one dry word for the situation: karma. It is pretty obvious that the original wound never really stopped stinging. The woman waiting on the other side would bring him children, a marriage, and a war that lasted nearly a decade. The storm named Angelina. Brad and Angelina quickly became the couple that everyone watched, whether they wanted to or not. The press handed them a single nickname, Brangelina, and treated their every move like breaking world news. Together they built a huge blended family, raising 6 children between adoption and birth. And for a long stretch, they looked like the most powerful and glamorous pair in all of Hollywood. They traveled the globe, championed causes, and seemed larger than life. They waited years before making any of it official. In 2014, after their children reportedly begged them to, Brad and Angelina finally married in a private ceremony at their estate in France. The wedding felt like the happy ending to a love story that had somehow survived endless scrutiny and judgment. Fans allowed themselves to assume the worst of the drama was finally behind the couple, and that this was the marriage that would actually stick. It did not. In 2016, Angelina filed for divorce, and what followed was anything but quick or clean. The split curdled into a long and bitter legal fight that stretched on for years, touching everything from custody of the children to ownership of a sprawling French vineyard. It finally ended in December of 2024, more than 8 long years after it first began. By then, the saga had become one of the most exhausting celebrity divorces anyone could remember. The fight grew far uglier than a normal celebrity split ever should. At the heart of it sat Chateau Miraval, the gorgeous French vineyard where the couple had married, and the two of them battled over it in court for years as the lawsuits piled up. There were custody disputes, dueling legal filings, and serious allegations traded back and forth in public, and the children watched their parents wage a war that never seemed to end. What had started as the most glamorous romance in the world had curdled into something exhausting and bitter. By the time the paperwork was signed, Brad was a very different man than the one who had married Angelina with such hope. The fighting had drained him, the headlines had chased him everywhere, and the children he loved were caught painfully in the middle of it all. Friends gossiped that the years of conflict had nearly broken him and that something inside him had quietly changed for good. To survive it, he would first have to confront the habits that had been silently destroying him for years: sobriety, regret, and the reunion. Somewhere in the middle of all that pain, Brad made a choice that may well have saved him. He got sober. He gave up the drinking and the habits that had dulled his life for decades, and people around him said he had landed in a completely different place than the troubled man Jennifer had once been married to. The change in him was real, and over time, it started to show in everything he did. In early 2020, the world got a rare glimpse of just how far he had come. Brad and Jennifer crossed paths backstage at an awards show and shared a warm and tender moment, and the internet promptly lost its mind. Two exes who had once been ripped apart in the tabloids were now laughing together, holding hands for a brief second, clearly at total peace with one another. Fans who had quietly grieved their split for 15 years felt something inside them finally heal. Reports claimed Brad finally took responsibility for how the marriage blew up, saying he apologized to Jennifer years ago and she moved past it a long time ago. He has publicly stated that she was a major part of his life and that he values her a lot, and anyone can see they respect each other now. Even now, a ton of fans still call Jennifer the one who got away, insisting he never should have let her go in the first place. The internet treated that reunion like the ending of a movie it had waited a decade and a half to see. Clips of the two of them smiling backstage raced around the world, and longtime fans flooded the comments with the same aching thought: that he had let go of the best thing he ever had. Jennifer, for her part, has said she does not regret a single moment of the marriage, and that she refuses to beat herself up over how it ended. Time had turned a painful divorce into a genuine, lasting friendship, which somehow made the old heartbreak sting even more. So the whole picture was changing once again. The man who had once named Gwyneth his great love now spoke just as tenderly about the wife who came after her. Two women, two different chapters, and yet the same unmistakable affection in his voice when he looked back on them both. Which leaves the single biggest question of all still hanging heavily in the air. So who was the love of his life? At 62, Brad looks like a guy who finally gave up on chasing every messy romance in sight. For the last few years, he has been quietly hanging out with Inez de Ramon, a jewelry designer he hooked up with after the nightmare breakup with Angelina. The two of them have gone out of their way to keep things quiet and out of the trashy tabloids. He claims his life actually feels stable and safe now, mostly because he stays surrounded by friends, family, and his new relationship, far away from the massive train wreck that used to be his daily routine. When he is asked what actually matters most to him now, his answer has become almost beautifully simple. He talks about how important it is to be around the people who love you back, the friends and the family, who choose to stay through everything. There is no drama left in his voice anymore, only the steady calm of someone who has lost more than enough to finally understand what truly counts. For a long time, he kept the new romance almost entirely hidden, the way a man does when he has been burned by the spotlight too many times. Then, in 2024, Brad and Inez stepped out together in public for the first time at the British Grand Prix, and weeks later, they walked a red carpet side by side at the Venice Film Festival. When people asked whether the timing was some clever publicity move, he laughed it off and said that life is not that calculated. that relationships simply evolve on their own. It was the answer of a man who has stopped trying to control how the world sees his heart. And yet the words from 1996 still echo down the years. He once stood on a stage and called Gwyneth the love of his life. And in that golden moment, he absolutely meant it. He later spoke of keeping the love he shared with Jennifer alive even after the divorce. He went on to build an entire family and a marriage with Angelina that consumed nearly 2 decades of his life. Each woman shaped him in her own way, and each one carried off a piece of him when she left. So which woman do you believe was the real love of Brad Pitt's life? Was it Gwyneth, Jennifer, Angelina, or someone the world never expected? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.